and welcome to this week's video. This week I'm on the new BMW R1250GS. So anyone that knows adventure bikes will know that this big BMW has long been the sort of king of the adventure bikes. This new model, it's the 1250 instead of the 1200. It has something called shift cam technology, which basically has a different cam higher up the rev range, so it gives you more power and more torque. I'm in North Yorkshire again, and I'm currently heading between York and Helmsley. As you can see, another lovely little Yorkshire village today. So weather-wise, then today it feels positively tropical after the minus figures we've had recently. It's 10 degrees the display is telling me, which, like I say, feels lovely and warm. As you can probably tell, the roads aren't great still. They're a bit damp and there's a lot of rubbish and gravel, as demonstrated. So I'm taking it especially easy. So this bike has different modes, sort of road. I think the other two sort of rain and sport or race, but I'm just keeping it in road, especially for the time being. There's a little bit of blue sky, so I'm hoping that the weather will get warmer and some of these roads will dry up. So let's not hit a sheep, shall we? Okay, so let's talk about the ergonomics of this bike. Its seating position, very upright like most adventure bikes, but super comfy because you're sat bolt upright. Legs are just bent very comfortably and your pegs are right below you, so of course that's great. If you are venturing off-road on one of these bikes, it means that standing up isn't an issue because your centre of gravity is right above the foot pegs, so that works nicely. Bars are nice and wide, so it's really easy to manoeuvre and very controllable. So yeah, so ergonomically it works really well, does this bike. When it comes to the dashboard, this has got the great new TFT. This 1250GS has the same screen as the 850GS that I previously reviewed, and this screen is just brilliant. Really readable. In sunlight it was good, very clear, everything in the right place, and as you change modes it sort of changes where things are and stuff. As you can see there, it's a fairly big warning that I need to refuel. So the great thing is that even though, as you can see at the top, it's got sort of tank, then it tells you your range, all that kind of thing, and again, as you can see, it's popped up and said go get some fuel. Other switchgear is all as you'd expect really. You've got the sort of heated grips, your mode button. The only option this bike's got is the sort of SOS type button, so it's quite nice to ride a bike that hasn't been laden with every single extra, but like I say, it's got pretty much everything you want. So up here is cruise control, it's got a little jog wheel here for going through your menus. Everything else is as expected, sort of your horn and indicators, everything just like any other bike really. All feels really decent quality, and one thing I do like that isn't often the case with bikes is when you turn your indicators off, it's got a solid click. A lot of bikes it just sort of cancels and you can't tell whether you've pressed it. You can tell whether you've pressed it when you're indicating, but not when you cancel, so it's really nice to actually get some feedback there. Wind protection, you're well protected. When I first saw the screen I didn't think it was going to be big enough, but actually completely I can feel it's only there that you start to get any air, so it's going right above my head, and you can adjust that. I won't do it on the fly, but you can basically spin that to make it go higher and lower, and I've got that set pretty much at the maximum at the moment. Comfort wise then, I've been riding for well over an hour and it's super comfortable. So the seat's good, everything's good. Of course, with this bike then, everyone's talking about this new engine, this 1250. It has something called shift cam technology, which basically means it's got variable cam timing. Performance wise, really good. It's got bags and bags of low down torque. Also the top end's pretty good, but it instantly goes. Throttle response is really good, and like I say, it's the torque of the thing that is amazing. I think the sort of horsepower figures are 134, something like that, but it's the torque. I think it has 120 odd Newton meters, which is a lot, and it's from really low down. The good thing with all that low down torque, of course, is that you can ride it quite lazily. You don't have to shift down gears all the time, and it's completely smooth throughout the rev range. A lot of reviews I've read of this have basically said how much smoother this engine is compared to the previous 1200, and quieter as well. But I've not tried the previous 1200, so it's not a comparison review. But yeah, it's super smooth. So I just stopped in Helmsley and I'm now heading up to Chopgate, and then from Chopgate I'll be going to Stokesley. So these roads are a little bit faster, these sort of bigger A roads, and hopefully a little bit drier and cleaner. Still don't look brilliant here, but it should be a bit better, I think. While I was in Helmsley, I met up with Paul from another YouTube channel called Biking Buddies, so do go check out Paul's channel too. Today Paul was doing a riding review as well. He was on a 1200 Triumph Explorer, so it was really good to have the bikes parked next to each other and see the similarities and the differences between them both. So size wise, really are very similar. Like I say, very comparable bikes. We both agreed that we think the BMW does pick the post, but we both think that the Triumph looks a bit better. So really interesting to actually have those comparisons, and especially it's just comedy that we're both taking two bikes for review that are so well matched. So this is where all that torque comes into play. It just makes overtaking an absolute breeze. So I've just put the bike into rain mode, and even in this mode it's quick. So now I'm in dynamic mode. So earlier I think I called it race or sport, it's actually called dynamic. But yeah, you can instantly tell the difference. Its throttle response, which I thought was really good anyway, is absolutely bonkers. And you've got instant power, you can tell it's done something trickery there. If you want to know what this bike sounds like, then I've just recorded a bit of a rev bomb for you. It is quite throaty, and this is with just the stock exhaust. I think if you have an aftermarket exhaust, it'd be really good. You can tell there's some potential there already. Having said that, it's not overly quiet anyway, so if it was me, I probably wouldn't bother changing the exhaust, or at least not until I'd had it quite a while and got bored. But something I will say about this bike is just how comfortable it is, and how relaxed it is. I think that engine that you don't need to rev just makes it an absolute doddle to just plod along. Obviously when you want to go you can, but I completely understand why people say they're such a great touring bike and good for doing long distances. Later on I'm going to try and take it on a big dual carriageway, because again with this kind of bike for a big continental tour. It'd be really good for that kind of thing, so I think it's a good idea to test it on those sorts of roads, because if you're going to go to the south of Spain, you're not going to go on roads like this all the way there. The other thing that surprised me is, yes, it's a big heavy bike, but it doesn't feel it as soon as you're moving, and even at sort of low speeds it's still really manoeuvrable. It doesn't feel like a big heavy bike. It's quite nimble really. When it comes to suspension, then as you'd expect on sort of a top spec bike, it's got everything's all singing, all dancing. So the rear shock is electronic, so you can adjust that from the TFT screen, but it does a great job of just soaking up the bumps. The front suspension as well, you've got a lot of feel through it still, but it just soaks up these bumps here, and all different sort of terrain, but the front end feels completely planted at all times too. Gearbox and clutch, then super easy to use, very light clutch. Gearbox super smooth as well. Sometimes there's no sort of mechanical give, so sometimes when you change you're not sure whether you have actually changed gear. Something I did struggle with initially when I first jumped on the bike was the clutch is fairly digital, fairly on off. It didn't have the movement of what I'm used to. I do seem to have got used to that now though, so again I think it's just one of those things that it's just not the same as my bike, so it feels differently, so it's me rather than the bike that's messing up. So if you're ever in this sort of area in North Yorkshire near Helmsley, then I'd highly recommend this road. Obviously in winter it's got a bit of mud and it's a bit wet, but in summer it's a lovely road. As you can see, it's twisty, it's got ups and downs, it's got everything. It's a really nice road to ride. And this is the road that goes between Helmsley to Chopgate and then up to Stokesley. So if you're looking for a road in this area, then do check this one out. So surprisingly, even at these sort of low speeds and manoeuvring, it's a lot better than you'd expect. It doesn't feel a huge heavy bike. So this is Stokesley. So next on this little trip we're heading down to Thirsk, so we're going to be doing a bit of dual carriageway to see how the bike behaves there. Yeah, when it comes to the brakes, then really good. And again, it's got all ABS and fancy stuff there, and the electronic suspension probably helps with all that too. Something this bike does have that's really good is hill assist. So you just stop like normal, hold the front brake, let go, an H has appeared, and that's it. We're on a slight incline here and it holds the bike for you, so really useful. And when you do come to set off, it automatically switches off, a bit like an automatic handbrake in modern cars. So I thought I'd come on a much bigger, faster road, because again I think this bike could be used for this a lot. If you're going to do a tour of the south of France or head down to Spain, then you're going to be hitting motorways. So at these motorway kind of speeds, then it's really relaxed, again completely effortless. We're doing 70 mile an hour here in 6th gear, it's only doing 4,000 revs, so it feels super relaxed, really comfortable. Bike feels totally planted as well. Your wind protection's working just as well at these speeds as the lower speeds, so yeah, it would definitely be good for what it's actually designed for, which is this kind of stuff to get to your destination and then a bit of fun once you get there. So while we're stuck in this 50 mile an hour speed limit, let's do what I usually do, a bit of a summary and the positives and negatives of this bike. So positives, I now totally get why these big BMW GSs are so popular. It's fun to ride, it's good on the motorway, it's good on A roads, it's good on B roads, suspension's really good, brakes are good, this engine's cracking, sounds nice, everything. So yeah, as a sort of all-round bike then, I think it ticks every box. So any negatives with the bike? I guess the price may put some people off, but it's not a BMW specific thing. If you compare it with things like the Triumph 1200 Explorer, the KTM Super Adventure, any of these big sort of 1200 adventure bikes, they're all pretty much similar prices. So when you compare like for like, then price can't really be listed as an option there. Then there were just other niggly things, some to do with me rather than the bike, I think, and getting used to it. So as I mentioned, I found the clutch a bit digital at first. I think that was me getting used to it, and again that little side stand thing that when I first started using it, then I was like, well, where is it? It's fiddly because it's between the pegs, but it's one of those things that you'd probably just get used to. The keyless ignition, then that works really well. You just put your key in your pocket and away you go. The only issue I had with that was when I came to put fuel in. I just couldn't get this fuel cap open. So in the end I had to resort to Googling why, and it turns out that if the bike's been off for more than 30 seconds then it won't unlock. It's not left unlocked, which is sort of understand, and it's not a long-term issue. It was just because I'm new to the bike and I just couldn't get the fuel cap open. What else is there as negatives? On the dashboard, then the screen is adjustable. You can adjust the height, but it's a manual as opposed to the Triumphs, which are electric, and you can just push to make it go up and down. So you have to sort of reach with your left hand. I suppose you could put the cruise control on to do it, but again, it's not a huge issue, that. But then a slight annoyance is to the right of the screen here. Then you think, great, I've got a USB port, but BMW insist on putting a proprietary BMW plug rather than USB. I think you can get an adapter that goes from that to a USB, but you do think, well, why not just use USB like everyone else? Because everyone's got those for charging phones and stuff. So yeah, very few negatives and only small niggly things. As I said, I've been really impressed. Before this review, then I couldn't see why someone would choose the 1200 over the 850, and I've really held the 850 in high regard. Last year it was one of my top bikes that I rode, and I thought, well, how can you improve it? I thought this may feel a bit big and cumbersome compared to it, but it doesn't at all, which was a surprise. I thought it'd feel a lot bigger, and it doesn't. Obviously if you're small, then a big adventure bike like this may be a struggle. I'm 6 foot and I can get my feet flat on it. They do a low seat version as well, so that may address that, but that's just something to be aware of. It is a tall and a big heavy bike, so you may struggle if you're smaller. I was going to say that it may not be an ideal commuter, but actually, as I've sort of shown today, it's fine around town. Initially when you look at the bike you think it's huge, but actually it's not. It's not that much wider than my V-Strom, I don't think. So I think it is a good sort of jack of all trades. It does do everything really well. So who do I think this bike's aimed at? I think it's aimed at anyone that does actually want to get the best out of the bike and do some touring. So that's what these bikes are designed for. I think it'd be a waste of money to buy something like this and just use it for commuting or the occasional Sunday morning blast. It's meant for these long sort of European tours or North Coast 500, that kind of stuff, and it really would be a great bike to do those on. If you've not seen my review of the BMW R1250GS, that's probably worth a watch as well as a bit of a comparison. So I'll put a link in the comments below to that video. If I had to sum up and describe this bike in one word, I think that word would be effortless, because that's how the engine feels, which can actually catch you out. You end up going a bit quicker than you think because it's so relaxed. The suspension's nice and soft, but it also handles, so again it just doesn't feel any effort. I've been out a few good hours now and I feel completely fresh. My bum's not numb, my arms don't ache, my wrists are fine, just everything. I can see why you could rack up a stack of miles each day on this bike and still be fresh at the end of the day. So I'd just like to say a huge thank you to the guys at Barrie Robson. So John there will look after you. If you're in the York area and want to go to an official BMW dealership and see all the different bikes they've got stacks there. So do go check them out. And finally, thanks for watching this video. I make videos like this every week, sometimes reviews of bikes, sometimes reviews of product. I've got a scrambler build going on at the moment. There's always something motorcycle related, and these are published every Monday on my channel. So if you want to get notified of these as soon as they're published, then do like and subscribe to the channel, and if you hit that bell notification, then you'll get the notification. So that's it for this week. Thank you.